director of Project ScaleUp, where I help turn business ideas into sustainable and viable ventures. Our guest today is Abbey Mui, CEO and founder of Rebloom, a nonprofit dedicated to helping women and minority owned businesses gain online visibility. It's technology for community. Abby, can you please tell us more about yourself and Rebloom?
Yeah, thank you, Tammy, for that lovely introduction. Rebloom is a nonprofit organization, as Tammy mentioned, and our mission is to make web services accessible, affordable, and sustainable for women and minority-owned small businesses. And we do this by running a 10-week program where we not only make some recommendations to small business owners, but we also help them build out their online solutions such as website or e-commerce. And more importantly, we teach them how to use it so that they can continue to edit and maintain it on an ongoing basis, eliminating the need for ongoing fees or signing a contract with a larger agency.
Can you tell me more about your background that makes you specially qualified to run something like Rebloom and guide, early stage or even more mature businesses who, have not taken the time to really learn and dive into what the digital world can offer their businesses in terms of, added revenue, added exposure, and things like that?
Yeah, great question. So I would say I'm a relatively young founder for a nonprofit organization. The idea for Rebloom really came to me when I was a senior in college. I went to Carnegie Mellon University and studied information systems, which is kind of like computer science and business. And I was a senior in the spring of 2020, which was at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. So at the time, all of our classes had gone online and the world just looked very different. And also at the time, my mom had recently acquired a child care center. She's a small business owner as well. And she has a child care center located just outside of Boston. And at the time, there were a lot of COVID restrictions that were put into place by the governor of Massachusetts, which is where I'm from. And so being a child care center, they were scrambling to figure out how to get everything in place. There was masking and cleaning, sanitization, and of course, getting children to social distance is pretty difficult if you know anything about children. So there's just so much to figure out. And by the time they were able to reopen after that mandatory shutdown, they had lost 50% of their students. Now, my mom, being the smart person she is, knew that she had to market. So she printed out a ton of flyers to put up in local pizza parlors, as well as lawn signs to put along busy roads. But the world just didn't operate like that anymore. People were door dashing or delivery more often, and many people were working from home. So those busy roads and busy community spaces were just not as busy anymore. So that's when my mom turned to online marketing. And, she had always been told that having a website was important, but no one really ever explained to her what that meant. So my mom turned to me for help, and I spent a lot of time looking through her website and trying to understand what it is that was important in order to get a business to grow online. And it's, of course, a website, but it's more than a website. It's about updating your website frequently and making sure that you appear in search. And there's just all these little things that a business owner doesn't necessarily think about because they're so busy doing everything else in their business. And in my mom's case, making sure that she was taking care of the children's safety, etc. So I spent about 80 or so hours redesigning her site, and I realized that I was going to be on the hook helping her for a while if I didn't also explain to her how to update the site. And that's really where it hit me, where my mom's not alone. There are a lot of small business owners out there who know having a website is important, but don't necessarily know what it means. Maybe they had a friend or family friend help them build out this website where now they feel guilty or just don't want to inconvenience that family or friend to help them update the site, so that, the site falls out of use or falls out of date, and where it's no longer super credible or actually helpful to that business anymore. And so at that time, I roped in a few friends to help me out. I realized that, my mom wasn't the only one in this. After doing a little bit of research and reaching out to local organizations that worked with small businesses, I realized that this was actually a really big niche and a really big need amongst small businesses and those that supported entrepreneurs. And so I roped in a couple of people. We started having more formalizing, like we had regular meetings, and eventually was able to get a strong team behind me, and we started building websites and online solutions for these small businesses. And there was just so much demand that when we started that, eventually we had to really organize the way that we were going to manage all of these projects and interact with the small businesses. And we found a lot of success. Eventually we found a lot of success, and I think we found our niche with traditionally underrepresented small business owners like my mom. mom.
So there were, I think, 3 points in there that I wanted to clarify. When you said you roped in a couple people, those were like-minded. Well, I guess in the beginning they were volunteers. They were also Carnegie Mellon University students like yourself.
Mhm.
Pretty brilliant ones because I've met them who wanted to help women and minority-owned businesses, and they got behind the mission of Rebloom. They're great, very intelligent people. And from there, it spread across other universities. You got volunteers from other universities as well.
Yes.
And you've built the team from one to how many now?
Well, we have a staff of 6 people, and then we have about 50 or so volunteers every year
Wow.
cycle through with us. Mhm.
So that's a mission that resonates, I think. And then when you speak of demand, what was the highest number of businesses applying to be part of Rebloom? Like they're saying, I need this.
Yeah, I would say we run a cohort system. So we run our program 3 times a year. And so at our peak, I would say we had about 50 applications from small businesses who wanted to take part in one of our cohorts.
And the only thing preventing Rebloom from helping everybody that can is capacity, funding and capacity. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I would say funding capacity. Like many nonprofits out there, we have limited resources and we do what we can with what we have.
Okay. Full disclosure, Rebloom, and I'm not tech savvy. I actually built Project ScaleUp myself. It was in a shape when I brought it to Rebloom. I don't know if it was in good shape or bad shape. It was in a shape. And your team helped me get it to a good enough shape, that it was going to be low maintenance, because even though I'm not, disassociated from tech, like I know my way around it, but my day job is to consult businesses, not fiddle around with code. That's not my day to day. And if it's not part of your day to day, once you open a WordPress site or whatever it is you're using, a Shopify site, whatever, it just sucks you in, and it just takes time away from, working on your business, trying to generate revenue, trying to market your business, trying to take care of logistics and operations. And so it is very distracting to try and do it yourself when that is not or no longer your forte. So that's what I would say. So I do want to thank you and your team for getting it into good shape from whatever shape it was in. So I am one satisfied client of Rebloom's. Okay, so we talked about the people and the mission and how you're able to get volunteers on board. I did want to ask, what's in it for the volunteers? What is the experience that they get out of Rebloom? Why should they become part of Rebloom and its mission?
That's a really great question. And so time and time again, we found that volunteers really enjoy the experience with Rebloom, and we have a pretty selective rate amongst our volunteers. We have about 50 or so volunteers apply per cohort, and we accept approximately 10 to 15 or so volunteers each time. And I would say that it's because the volunteer experience is a very well-rounded experience. We pair the volunteers up with project managers and a client to form teams of 4, and the volunteers are working with another individual or 2 other individuals that are extremely driven and want to create something that will make a difference in the world. Our volunteers are very mission driven. But in addition to that, they get to see the entire product lifecycle from, talking with the client or small business owner about what their problems are and trying to solve that using technology. But you're not only making a recommendation and doing research. As a volunteer, you'll also get a chance to build it from start to finish. So creating the prototypes, getting feedback on it, actually user testing with the audience of the small business, and then QA testing or quality assurance test the site, do design crits. You get to see the entire process from start to finish and also have a real impact in the community. There aren't a lot of opportunities like this for students or young professionals, or we work a lot with bootcamp grads as well, and there just aren't a lot of opportunities for someone to see the entire life cycle. Currently, most students maybe can see the entire life cycle in a class where it's all in a very theoretical sense, or they might get some hands-on experience at an internship, but typically at an internship, you get a very, very small portion of the project. And at Rebloom, we really trust our volunteers to build from start to finish for these small business owners. And many of them result in really great projects and very satisfied customers.
Now, what kind of involvement is required from the business owner? Are they completely hands off, or do you expect them to contribute somewhat?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure, Tammy, you had you remember your experience very well, but we want the business owner to be hands-on. If you're a business owner looking to, hands off, give your tech to somebody else, there are plenty of organizations out there and companies out there that are doing this, but we're a nonprofit organization and our mission is to make tech accessible. And so part of what we're doing is educating small business owners on what the process looks like, as well as how to get involved in each stage. Now, after the project ends, perhaps small business owner realizes this is actually going to take up too much of my time. I need to hire somebody. I see that as a win in my book as well, because they're understanding what the process really entails and how much time they're able to free up if they give this process to somebody else. So from our small businesses, we ask that they have a really strong business plan, because at the end of the day, you need to understand what they're selling and be able to talk about it on their website. But in addition to that, we will meet with them once a week, every week, to get feedback on what we're building, make sure that they're keeping up with their training as well, so that they understand how to use the site towards the end, and also generally be a part of that process and brainstorming ideas. But in addition to that hour meeting, we ask that business owners set aside 1 to 2 hours additional time to work on their site. And these 1 or 2 hours are spent working directly on the site, either gathering assets, photos, writing up copy for the site, or working on training tasks. So I'm actually trying out the site and familiarizing themselves with different features to make sure that they can ask questions now while we're working with them. We can make changes now, as opposed to doing all of that at the end when we're out of time.
And are you comfortable talking about the value of Rebloom? If not, we can skip it, because I've been doing a little bit of scouting over Fiverr, over Shopify, because we have a Shopify store for another client of Project ScaleUps, and the cost is at least average 3 times as high, and you get like a team of one where Rebloom provides you not only a project manager, but you get a designer and you get a developer, and all of their work ladders up to a more senior person for review before it even gets approved and ready. There's progress every week, ready for the review sessions with the entrepreneur. So how would you characterize like the value that you get from Rebloom?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say market rate, maybe in 2020, is that businesses really currently have one of two options in terms of building a website. They can either do it themselves, watch YouTube videos or try to build a website, which can take a lot of hours, probably upwards of 100 hours, with no guarantee of a great result. Or they can
That's
hire
what I
someone.
did, and I'm pretty versed.
And you spend a lot of time on your website, probably, right?
I did, and it still, like I said, was in some form of shape.
Yeah, and I mean that's great, right? It's great that you're learning to do it yourself, but akin to taking a class, sometimes it's just you learn, you know what to learn, or you learn much faster when someone's telling you exactly what to study, and that's what we're doing at Rebloom. And a small business's other option is either hiring a freelancer where they get a team of one, or they can hire a full-scale agency where they'll do the photography, copywriting, marketing, all of that. So there's definitely many options that range quite a bit in terms of budget, but having a website that's 5 to 7 pages, typical of a small business, might cost anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 for a complete site. And so what we charge at Rebloom is for the program, so program participation, and the value of our program, the value of our site, we say is about $5,000. However, we're a nonprofit organization and we're able to utilize the generosity of foundation grants, as well as individual donors, and the generosity of the time of our volunteers. And we're able to bring that cost down so that the business contribution is $1,500 of the $5,000 total cost.
And then I did want to ask you sort of when you started this, it's ambitious in the sense that when you started this, and you probably still are, you were under 25, you were pretty young. You got people behind you on the mission, but trying to raise money from the foundations to subsidize this. Did your age work for you or against you? Did it matter at all? And if it did, like how did you overcome some of the challenges that came with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely think that being a young founder, there are a lot of doubts in the nonprofit community. Nonprofits tend to be a little bit older, more established organizations, but it doesn't mean that there aren't grassroots organizations doing the same. There aren't grassroots organizations that are smaller and younger. I would say that many foundation, when we first met with them, were very skeptical. This like new organization, very young founder, not much experience in the nonprofit world. But the nice thing is that I'm not doing this alone anymore. I have a very strong board of directors behind me. We have 12 people with a variety of industry knowledge, nonprofit background, etc. And so their expertise has really helped in seeking funding because they understand the nonprofit world very well, and they're able to attend those meetings with us as well and say, I know Abby's young, but I've seen the work that she's done, and it's great. And having other people vouch for you has been, I would say, very instrumental in seeking funding.
And that's a great segue to my next question. How often do you seek advice or mentorship from the experienced entrepreneurs, other business leaders, other advisors?
Yeah, that's a great question. I seek it all the time. I would say every day if I could. But I seek it from, I think it doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be intimidating to ask for help. I understand that I'm young. I don't have a ton of years of work experience, but every day I'm learning something new, and I'm trying to apply it and make Rebloom the very best it can be. But sometimes that comes with personal development, comes with organizational development, and that's where it's been really helpful. So for personal development, I have many mentors who want to see me succeed. And then also from an organizational mentorship, organizations like Project ScaleUp have been very helpful when it comes to giving me business advice, because I didn't think I would be an entrepreneur 3 years ago, but every day I'm learning and I'm building and trying to be the best that we can be.
So you're one of a kind. You're very organized, process oriented, coachable. How do you process, or what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs regarding taking critical feedback? How do you process critical feedback?
I think like the biggest thing that I've internalized is I'm not going to be the best at everything. There's always going to be someone out there that's better than me at one area, but I might be better than them in a different area. And so why not learn from these people? And sometimes that might be taking a step back and reflecting on the advice that they give you, where it's not an attack of me as a person or my character, but rather they want to see me succeed. We both want to see the organization succeed. We're both aligned in our goals, and making these changes is going to help in the long run. And that's really what I think about. I think sometimes it can be really easy to get frustrated or defensive, but taking a step back and thinking, we're both aligned on these goals. This person really wants to help me, and this is the way that I should consider doing something differently. And you can try it, and maybe it doesn't work for you, but if you don't try, you will never know if it will end up helping.
And then going back to Rebloom, how do you need to differentiate your product or service given that it's a nonprofit from competitors in the market?
Yeah, definitely. I would say we're competing in many different fields. I think you're always going to have competitors, whether you're a for-profit, nonprofit, etc. Even if you're coming up with a brand new idea, you're still competing with existing ideas. And I think in terms of the market, we're competing with existing for-profit web agencies, or we're competing with freelancers, or an offshore team that might be way cheaper than what we're offering. So in that space, I think what differentiates us is the education factor, and the fact that this is a cohort-based program where we want our businesses to continue to use each other as a resource, and that we understand that entrepreneurship can be a very lonely journey, and that they're not just plugging it into our community, but also an entrepreneurship ecosystem in the Pittsburgh community that we're a part of. And then in terms of in the nonprofit space, I would say that we are competing, I guess, with other nonprofit organizations for funding, but that's not the way I like to think about it, because I don't think
That's coming from a place of scarcity, right?
Yeah, it's coming from a place of scarcity, and that's not the mindset that I feel like a nonprofit should have.
Right.
There's a lot of opportunity for collaboration, and we're really starting to see it in the Pittsburgh area, where foundations want to see nonprofit organizations collaborate for different programs. And a lot of the nonprofits in the entrepreneurial ecosystem also want to collaborate, because they understand that, if you go through a branding boot camp, it's not going to live in a vacuum. And going through the Rebloom program, your website doesn't live in a vacuum. All of this ties together as part of your greater business plan, your business model, etc. And so I would say we're really just filling a niche that didn't exist before. this like entrepreneur cohort type of program, but specifically for like a digital presence, digital marketing, and website.
I know Ascender and Rebloom does have a collaboration where we do the incubator program for entrepreneurs. But hey, we collaborate with Rebloom because they all need some form of digital awareness to help sell those products and get customer feedback. And you can't really do customer discovery if nobody knows about you, if the customers don't know about you. So it's a very good fit. Now, what is your approach for product development for Rebloom?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when it comes to product development, right now we just have our 10-week program, but I think we take feedback very seriously. We are constantly asking for ways to improve. We say, even if you don't have anything, tell us that too, because that's helpful. And so, in order to improve our existing product or program services, we're always asking for feedback from our existing group of small businesses that we're working with, from our volunteers, from our project managers. And between cohorts, we really try to actually act on that feedback. And if you ask any of our volunteers or the businesses, our program looked very different 1 year ago than when it did today. We're always adding new things or taking things that, didn't really work and trying to replace it or update it. But then in terms of thinking about where else there might be demand for more of these types of services, it's really listening to the business clients. So now we've been doing this work for about 3 years. We've reached back out to some of our past businesses to ask them, you're 3 years out or you're 2 years out. What do you wish that you'd learn if you had more support? Where would you want that support? And really just listening to the needs of the businesses directly, as well as talking to some of our community partners or organizations that support us, and ask, like, in your business network or your business community, what are the needs that you're still seeing among small business owners, and where is a gap that we might be able to fill based on our area of expertise and the resources that we have.
Now, we talked about, you help them build websites, SEO friendly websites, appealing websites for their clientele. Can you share some of the outcomes or some of the wins that, and you don't have to name names if they might not be comfortable with it, but I know some of them have been sharing. Can you name some of like example wins that some of your clients have had because of Rebloom, or it was directly because of Rebloom that they realized those wins?
Yeah, I would say overall in our 2022 annual reports in the year of 2022, we saw that all of the small businesses that we worked with, 89% self-reported an increase in tech understanding. So after going through a program, they feel more comfortable with technology. They feel like they can update their site on an ongoing basis. But then more specific wins, we worked with the Pittsburgh Latino magazine, and they actually won the most improved digital publication, I believe, in 2022. And they saw a significant increase in leads of people coming to the website. And we've worked with a variety of other organizations that have also seen leads or increased leads coming to their site. I know, Tammy, you had a pretty big win recently. Would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so because previously when I worked on my website, I was not happy with I didn't like how it was not professional looking. So I took it to Rebloom to, hey, it doesn't represent what I need it to represent. I do business consulting. This doesn't look businessy. It used images that are cartoony. There's cartoons that look professional, and there are ones that do not. And so I need it to represent more of what I do, how I coach, my method of coaching, which is very personable, very warm. We can discuss how everything ties together. And that kind of is what I needed to portray. And so, but since getting my website done by Rebloom, I've been more proud to share it, obviously. And then when the opportunity came up, I was featured by Bloomberg. I'm like, oh, here's my website. And they literally, I think what happened was I had this connection, and they were working with some journalists, and they were going through a bunch of consultants like myself who know what it's like on the ground when inflation hit, right? And how they were doing research on how inflation was affecting small businesses. And I happen to have knowledge of, yes, how is inflation affecting entrepreneurs? And so they were looking at different consultants, and the way they were looking at different consultants was looking at their websites. And so that representation pretty much drove the decision of like, okay, who are we going to cite? And because I had the website pretty much say what I do and portray what I do and who I work with, because we have that clients page laid out pretty well and describe what the businesses are of who I work with and how we work with them, I guess I was selected. And Bloomberg interviewed me asking those questions of what is it like for your clients, and I was able to provide them the information. So the opportunities can come with how they perceive you. It's a I call it the 7 to 11 second first impressions, right? And if your website isn't portraying what it is that you do and the impact that you make, you've lost the 11 seconds or 7 seconds that it takes somebody to make an opinion or a first impression. And so yeah, that's the impact that Rebloom made for me. And so I imagine that um, that others have similar or different outcomes, but they have an outcome coming out
Mhm.
of their engagement with Rebloom.
Yeah, and that's huge, Tammy. Congratulations. If people want to learn more about the impact, we have our annual report on our website, www.re-bloom.org, under impact, and we share some success stories in the past year.
And then getting into tips. Do you have any marketing tips for other entrepreneurs that you found that works?
Yeah, I think the biggest tip that I like to give is put out content that you would be interested in reading. Put out useful content. So, while staff features might be fun or fun stories from your company might be fun, think about the types of content that you as a consumer like to read about. You're probably searching for answers to some questions that you might have, or you want to read more informational tips and tricks, etc. So that's the type of content that you want to put out, and that's the type of content people will find you from and feel a sense of authority from you from. So there's lots of ways to do this, but you can look at trending topics in Google with the rise in AI tools such as ChatGPT. You can also look there, have that help you write content. And there's just so many tools now that help decrease the amount of time it takes to actually write useful content.
So you're running a nonprofit, you're a single founder, right? You don't have any co-founders. How are you balancing running a pretty early stage organization, building your board members basically? Like you've just recently built this team. Expanding, I know Rebloom is always expanding because you want to serve more businesses, right? How are you balancing all of this, your organization and your person? Do you have a personal life? I don't know if you do, but how are you balancing if you did have one?
Well, I'm a very big supporter of work-life balance, but I think work-life balance differs for everyone. For some, it's 9 to 5, and then 5 to 9 is your own time. And for me, it just looks a little bit different. I'm very lucky, again, that even though I'm a sole founder, I have a lot of people that are supporting me. I have a very great board of directors and a really great team. But I think the thing that has been the most helpful is that we're a distributed team. So most of our work is done in the virtual space. And this has been, I guess, an outcome or how things have changed since COVID. But it's actually been a format that has worked really well for us because most small business owners, it allows us to meet them where they are. It allows for more flexibility. And because of that, though, I think it has allowed me to spend more time on the things that matter. So spending time on working on my business instead of commuting and traveling and sitting in traffic. And for me, prioritizing the things that are important to me. So I'm someone that really likes to take walks to clear my head, and I really like being under the sun. So in the winter, when it's really difficult to see the sun after 4 p.m., I'll take an hour and a half lunch in the middle of the day to make sure I get that walk in. And then that means I have to work later at night until 7, 8, or 9. But that's okay because for me, that is work-life balance. I'm able to get the things that I want, and I don't mind working later in the day. And I think that has really helped that schedule flexibility. And again, very lucky that I'm able to do this because of the way that we work. The other big thing is, I think, understanding your own capacity and being realistic has been another thing that's really helped in terms of, 3 big priorities and probably up to 10 actual tasks a week. That has helped me to say no to things I can't do and also prioritize my time accordingly. And of course, I have a great team behind me where they're also working on things in tandem with me. So again, I don't feel alone or that I'm doing this by myself.
And for whoever's watching, Abby, I've always called you an anomaly because despite your young age, you're probably one of the best managers that I've witnessed. One of the best. And then, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs? Because you are one of the best looking to start their own businesses in the near future.
Yeah, I would say just do it. Just start. It can be really intimidating, but think about what you can do today to just get started. Maybe it's just taking yourself a little bit more seriously, telling people about your idea and hearing what feedback you get. But the advice I like to give my friends and family is you have to be your own number one fan. You have to believe in yourself first and foremost because no one is going to believe in you more than yourself.
So, and some people, even older ones, struggle with this, right? You've been able to manage and lead a team that's very distributed digitally. Any special tips around that? How to do that?
I think it just has to do with just being more flexible and coming away from the traditional mindset of we need to have weekly meetings at the same time every time. And you really have to figure out what works for your team. So for our team, really hard with the different time zones to get everyone to meet together at the same time on a weekly basis. So instead, we do asynchronous, what we call Slack stand-up, where we just post on Slack very briefly once a week at the same time or like on the same day, what we're working on, where we think there's opportunity for collaboration, what might be preventing us from making further progress. And that allows me to have some oversight on what my team is working on. But also that collaboration piece is key because then my team members can see amongst each other where there is opportunity for collaboration, they can take initiative to do it themselves. And again, I really think that my team does a great job coming up with their own initiatives and seeing something that could be improved and taking the time to actually improve it.
You give them a lot of autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Shameless plug. How can the audience support Rebloom right now? What does Rebloom need?
Yeah, I would say definitely stay up to date with us on our different social medias. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Rebloom Digital. On our website, re-bloom.org, we also have a newsletter where you can stay up to date on our current happenings. And of course, we are a nonprofit, so we always appreciate any monetary support as well. And you can find that at re-bloom.org/donate.
Are there any organizations, individuals who have been just key to your success, have been part of your journey that you want to acknowledge in case they're watching?
Yes, so many. Project ScaleUp and Tammy being one of them. I think in the beginning you were super instrumental in making sure that I really understood what I was getting into.
That is the job.
But beyond that, definitely Ascender for believing in us and accepting us into their incubation cohort in 2021, as well as the YWCA of Creative Pittsburgh for being our fiscal sponsors, and my entire board of directors today, but also in the past, any of our advisors as well, to our staff for their countless hours of hard work, and of course to our volunteers and project managers, because truly what we're doing wouldn't be possible without their dedication.
All right, well, that wraps up their interview. Thank you so much, Abby, for joining us and for women and minority-owned businesses. And they don't have to be in Pittsburgh, right? They can apply, and the application form is over at re-bloom.org. You'll find it there. If you're interested, please get in touch with Abby and her team. All right. Well, thank you so much, Abby.
Thank you, Tammy.